Welcome. I never thought anything about serial killers, and certainly never thought I would understand them. I never doubted the professionals who said it was for control, done by people not raised right, who were powerless in their lives. And I always thought serial killers were few and far between. Then the story of a man crossed my path, and I realized all that they thought and all that I thought was wrong. I studied serial killers and mass murderers, some of whom were children, and I learned things that were beyond what I ever would have imagined. I learned there were many more serial killers and mass murderers than I had known, and I realized that for each one, there was at least one death, usually many more, and sometimes more than 100. Though police and FBI do a great job, but usually someone has to die before they are called in. Only with understanding can we heal this, stop this horrible situation, and save lives. So please watch this as I take you through what Sol Pais called another dimension. Learn from it and tell everyone you know, because I cannot do this alone. Knowing why all this is happening is a terrible burden and a great responsibility. It is also an honor and a journey, but not my journey, but our journey. I have a lot of answers, but I don't have them all yet. For that, I need your help. Good guy or bad guy? Actually, both. This is Ricardo Caputo. He was a serial killer from Argentina who killed 4 to 6 people. He died in Attica State Prison after he turned himself into the police. Ricardo Caputo said, "I turned myself in order to avoid more killings. When I did what I did, I was sick, and I hope that I can be cured while I am incarcerated. That's all I have to say." The year was 1994. Sadly, I don't think he had the healing he wished for, but at least he killed no more. Andrei Chikatilo, 56 murders in the Soviet Union, executed Valentine's Day, 1994. These are his words. "What I did wasn't for sexual pleasure. Rather, it brought me some peace of mind. When I used my knife, it brought me some psychological relief. I know I have to be destroyed. I was a mistake of nature." Stephen killed 5 people before the age of 21. In prison, he killed himself by hanging. His words were, "I can't help the way I feel. What I did was wrong. I know that, and I feel for them, but it doesn't mean I won't do it again." And in America, William killed 3 people. He was 17 years old, still a child himself in reality. William Herons will spend the next 65 years of his life in prison and basically die there. The date that he went on his killing spree was December 10th, 1945. This was written on the wall of a murder with the victim's lipstick. So the killer, William Hearns, was labeled the lipstick killer. But why did he write it? Hopefully, you'll understand by the end of this presentation. Wesley Allen Dodd once wrote a pamphlet on how parents can protect their children from child molesters. Wesley chose to allow his execution because he said he would kill and rape again if he could. He stated that death would give him relief over the murders. He chose hanging because that was how his last victim died. I'll do it again. I was a mistake of nature. I cannot control myself. I can't help the way I feel. When I did what I did, I was sick, and I hope that I can be cured while I'm incarcerated. It brought me some peace of mind. I could have filled up pages and pages of serial killers saying the exact same thing. This is the movie that changed my life and brought me to the understanding of why many serial killers kill and child molesters molest. The understanding I hope to share with you. Russell Williams was a colonel and a killer. Some could say he was not a serial killer because he got caught after only 2, but he would have been. This is the movie that changed my life and brought me to this place of understanding today. This is Colonel Russell Williams, second in command at Trenton Air Force Base in Canada. Colonel Williams flew fighter jets. He was in charge of flying Queen Elizabeth to her destinations. And this is Colonel Williams. After stealing and wearing women's and girls' underwear, he resorted to rape, then murder, before he was caught. Many who talk of serial killers say they do so because they want power in their lives. Russell Williams' case throws that theory out the window. He had control over an entire Air Force base and flew fighter jets. He completely shoots down the theory of the FBI and police that serial killing is due to the killer wanting control. He was very powerful. But it was this situation that made me question why, if he wanted to dress in women's underwear, he didn't simply buy it from the store. Why did he risk everything to steal it? There is a reason. When asked by the police detective after his confession if he would have killed again if he hadn't been caught, he said, "I was hoping not." This was the second question for me.
Let me ask you this. If it didn't come to the point it's at right now, if for whatever reason you didn't end up on our radar, so to speak, do you think it would have happened again? I was hoping not.
Hope is not something you turn to when you have any control. Like so many of the serial killers and child molesters I have studied, they have only hope that they will not kill or molest again. They can't stop. As I watched this movie, I realized that I knew why it was all happening. I knew why Russell Williams did what he did. I knew the answer to the mystery did not lie in psychology, but in child development, of which I have a degree. No matter where in the world you go, serial killers exist, and they almost always all say the same things in the same way. They cannot stop, and they don't know why. In my research, I read about and listened to the words of so many serial killers. My goal was to hear that still small truth hiding among the vile acts I had to listen to. And that still small truth was there. When I wrote this for the first time, I had found over 24 with this disorder that made them kill. Since I researched on my phone, more and more came up on my screen. There are hundreds of thousands of people with this same disorder, and they are all over the world. What I found was that for most of them, they really didn't want to kill. They are driven by a compulsion that they cannot control, just as William Herones said. And they came from normal, everyday loving families. They were not hung by their thumbs as children. This is William Herones' parents and Jeffrey Dahmer's parents. I think it was his stepmother who said she cried every night since she found out what happened. This is Jeffrey Dahmer. When this was taken, he was already ill, and he knew something was wrong. Something was missing. At age 7, he said. He was just a child. And this is Jeffrey Dahmer. Those who don't know, he was considered the Milwaukee cannibal because he killed 17 men, kept body parts in his house, and ate some of the body parts. This is Jeffrey's statement at the end of his trial.
Your Honor, it is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick. The doctors have told me about my sickness, and now I have some peace. I know how much harm I have caused. I tried to do the best I could after the arrest to make amends, but no matter what I did, I could not undo the terrible harm I have caused. I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families, and I understand their rightful hate. I decided to go through this trial for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was to let the world know that these were not hate crimes. I wanted the world in Milwaukee, which I deeply hurt, to know the truth of what I did. I didn't want unanswered questions. All the questions have now been answered. I wanted to find out just what it was that caused me to be so bad and evil. But most of all, Mr. Boyle and I decided that maybe there was a way for us to tell the world that if there are people out there with these disorders, maybe they can get some help before they end up being hurt or hurting someone. I think the trial did that.
This is what I learned about so many killers from Jeffrey Dahmer. They don't want to kill. They are like this from birth. They are often intelligent. They typically don't hate. They don't know why they kill. They try not to kill, and they try to do good. Here's what I have learned from Jeffrey Dahmer. First is that the crimes are random for simply the purpose of getting what is needed from killing, which is to kill. Jeffrey said, "I hated no one." Second is that since the victims were objectified, the sadness is for the families as they speak at trial of their pain, but not for the victim. "I feel so bad for what I did to those poor families," Jeffrey said, "and I understand their rightful hate." Third is that they have no idea why they have to kill, and they want to know why. Jeffrey said, I want you to find out just what it was that caused me to be so bad and evil. One reason Jeffrey went through the trial was to tell the world there was no hate. Killers with this disorder kill randomly, and though it may be that the victims are similar, the murders were not for hate or any other sensible reason. They are random, and sometimes a similarity simply makes killing easier. Fourth is that the killers often want to help others once they are caught and the compulsion has no more outlet. Jeffrey said, maybe there was a way for us to tell the world that if there are people out there with these disorders, maybe they can get some help before they end up hurt or hurting someone. Fifth is that they don't know why it started. Jeffrey said, I don't know why it started. I don't have any definite answers on that myself. If I knew the true, real reasons why all this started before it ever did, I wouldn't probably have done any of it. Note, Jeffrey stated he knew something was wrong when he was 7 years old. Sixth is that it is uncontrollable, just as William Heron said. Jeffrey said, I was completely swept along with my compulsion. I don't know how else to put it. It didn't satisfy me completely, so maybe I was thinking another one will. Maybe this one will. And the numbers started growing and growing and just got out of control, as you can see. One thing I know for sure, he said, it was a definite compulsion because I couldn't quit. I tried, but after the ambassador, I couldn't quit. It would be nice if someone could give the answer on a silver platter as to why I did all this and what caused it, because I can't come up with an answer. Seventh is that it can be fast and often completely uncontrollable. One man compared it to a sneeze. Jeffrey said, like arrows shooting through my mind from out of the blue. Fantasies. Eighth is that they often try to stop using different methods. Many times he talked about how he was trying to fight it and said he'll never do it again, his lawyer said. Mark Condit was the Austin bomber. He came, as many do, from a good family. He and Sean Gillis felt they were always psychopaths or monsters.
How did this come to be, man? The word monster come to mind.
Many tried to either stop themselves or attempt to fix whatever they could by telling their stories. But since they didn't know what happened to them, their stories are just guesses at the problem, as are many statements of law enforcement and forensic psychologists. If you read the diagnosis of Jeffrey Dahmer, you will see they are just descriptions of what he did, not a real diagnosis.
Maybe there was a way for us to tell the world that if there are people out there with these disorders, maybe they can get some help before they end up being hurt or hurting someone.
This is the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, where James Holmes walked in the night and killed 12 people. Prior to the killing, he had a 3.949 GPA in neuroscience. He also went to psychiatrist after psychiatrist, including one just before the shooting. I believe the study of neuroscience and the visits to psychiatrists were an attempt to heal himself and prevent the killings. I believe the last visit to the psychiatrist was to try to stop himself, just as William Heron's tried to with his note on the wall. And I believe the reason so many psychiatrists can't help is that the problem is not psychiatric. The field of child development is totally different than the field of psychology, though they overlap. And there are so many. At first, I was going to name some that I have found in my studies that had the disorder that caused the killing. As time went on, the list became enormous. The actual number is unknown because some get caught after one killing, some kill themselves, some are simply never caught. Still, the number I found was staggering. How they do it. According to Jeffrey Dahmer, if you see them as an object, it seems to make it easier. Often victims who live say the perpetrator seemed not to be human. Objectifying makes it easier to kill and then go back to being the everyday person. But the not being human part is even more telling. Remorse. Yes, I do have remorse, but I'm not even sure myself whether it is as profound as it should be. I've always wondered myself why I don't feel more remorse. What an odd thing for Jeffrey Dahmer to say, unless you understand. Serial killers often have no remorse for the dead victims, but when they hear the family testify at trial of their pain, it sometimes makes them cry. This is because they feel they were born this way. Therefore, they are not responsible for the death of their victims. The thought is that I was born this way, therefore I did not do anything wrong. And they have a point, since being people, they purposely did things wrong in their lives, but killing was not one of them. Trophies. You will often hear television shows or the like talk about killers saving trophies. Here is the thing, however. I do not believe taking jewelry or clothes or anything from the victim is really for a trophy. Trophies are typically displayed on a shelf for all to see. The keepsakes taken from victims or the photographs taken are often completely hidden and not on display. They are not trophies. They are medication. They relieve pain. For Russell Williams, the clothes he took were hidden from view and were categorized on his computer for him to return to as he chose. They were not on display. This is David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer from New York. He talks about the relief from killing, but relief from what? What is the it from which he needs relief? He also talks about how bad vanished, but only for a short time. This is why killers become serial killers. It doesn't work. Because killing either works for a short time or doesn't work at all, as stated by James Holmes. This is Sol Pais. People from Denver area know her well. She shut down the school system because she was perceived to be and was planning a school shooting. No one explained this disorder better than she. She had it, and she surely would have killed if not stopped. This is from her notebook. Here in the corner she wrote, "I am not sick, but I am not well." This is the same as what Ted Bundy said. I am 90% normal and 10% a serial killer.
I feel like a pot of scalding water on the verge of boiling over, so dangerously close to spilling over. And what that may cause is yet to be seen, and most likely a hazard to myself and others. I'm afraid of my currently unknown capacity for pain and misery and anger. Each time it gets exponentially worse and worse.
Soul wrote in her journal, "If you are reading this and you think you understand, listen to me. You do not."
You are not like me, and you will never be like me. Realize that my mind exists in and belongs to another dimension of thought.
I cannot express to you how important it is for you to understand that this really is another dimension, as Soul said. Now I'm going to tell you what it really is. The BTK killer called it Factor X. Others call it a mood or an obsession or a raging feeling. There are so many names and so many wrong explanations. It is the dimension of thought that was there before birth or before memory that keeps showing itself as missing in the lives of serial killers and child molesters. It is a dimension that holds the thought you have and use every day that you have no idea you use unconsciously over and over all day long. It is a dimension that serial killers and child molesters try to use but cannot because they have something missing. What went wrong? In order to understand what forensic psychologists call the mystery of mysteries that will never be solved, you have to understand the two parts to every thought that is in the mind and in every cell of the body. So I'm going to use a little story to explain it. Let's say you have a teenager and you come downstairs and you say to him, "It's Sunday night." Because you know Monday is when you take out the garbage, and so does he. So you say to him, "It's Sunday night, tomorrow's garbage day." And he just sits there and doesn't do anything. Will the garbage go out? No. Let's say, different scenario, you have a teenager, he's laying on the couch, and you say to him, because you know that the garbage goes out on Monday and it is Sunday night. You say to him, "Go do it." And he stands up and he sits down. And you say, "Go do it." And he stands up and he sits down. Because he doesn't have the concept of what it is you're talking about, but he takes the action. He tries. Many people who have developmental disabilities have the action, they don't have the concept. Therefore, they get up and they sit down, get up and sit down. After a while, it becomes rocking. Sometimes they'll walk aimlessly with nowhere to go because they're taking the action, but the concept is not there. The body is made up of cells, and the cells are different and serve different purposes. But they all have one thing in common. In order for the cells to take any action at all, they need two things. Every cell is told what to do with a thought, and every thought it is given consists of two united thoughts that act as one, concept thought and an action thought. Without these two linked thoughts, it would just sit there like a piece of wood. Every cell needs to be told what to do, concept thought, and every cell needs to be told to do it, action thought. It needs both. Concept thought and action thought plus physical cell equals a living, functioning, useful cell. Those cells together, including brain cells, which are basically a vehicle for the mind, form organs to make the body function. Mind. The body consists of physical cells, each of which are instructed by concept thoughts and their connected action thoughts. The mind consists of individual concept thoughts and action thoughts linked together, but without the physical cells. It's that simple. To get an idea of the number of thoughts placed in the mind of the child, simply look up at the sky. Some thoughts, like some cells of the bodies, are insignificant, and they would just be an annoyance if they were not there. But some thoughts, like some cells, if missing, would cause major damage to the child. There are simple thoughts planted in the mind of the child concerning the body, like the thought to cry when hungry, the thought to suck when the lips are touched, the thought to turn its head to find a nipple, the thought to move its legs, the thought to move its fingers, and so on. Some of these thoughts psychologist Jean Piaget labeled neonatal schemas because they were there before birth. All thoughts are part of the child's natural state of being. All of these pre-planted thoughts were part of the child's makeup. What is here is not anything you need to know except to understand that there is so much going on deeply in the mind of which we are completely unaware, so you get to see how deep and intricate the thoughts are. Here are a few of the concept thoughts planted in the young mind. Assimilation, the thought of using existing ideas to deal with new information. Accommodation, the thought of changing existing knowledge that does not work into new knowledge. Schema, a cohesive, repeatable action sequence possessing component actions that are tightly interconnected and governed by a core meaning. Equilibrium, the thought that is the force that drives the process that restores balance. Conservation, the thought that something stays the same in quantity though its appearance may change. Classification, the thought that there are groups that are the same because of dimension. Seriation, the thought that items can be arranged in quantifying dimension of height and weight. A child is eventually given the thought of what its physical place is in relation to the world around them. A child is eventually given the thought that it has an identity or personality. The child is eventually given the thought that it has an individual self. The child is given the thought it is a human entity. Puzzle Part 1. You use hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of intelligent, intricate thoughts every day you don't realize you even had. You had no idea when you were assimilating and accommodating, nor do you realize that you are doing it right now. Puzzle Part 2. Every thought in your mind and body is there to complete a task. Every thought is made of a concept thought and an action thought that works in unison. Puzzle Part 3. The natural state of being. The natural state of being. The thoughts placed in the child at birth that work perfectly, I call the person's natural state of being. Each of these hundreds of thousands, if not millions of thoughts is placed either by God or nature, whichever one you want to believe. What went wrong with a serial killer? When something goes wrong and one part of a specific thought is missing, you have a loss. The person's natural state of being causes the person to strive to fill the loss. In other words, to work properly. Because the lost thought is something needed each day, the person feels the loss all the time, and the action part of the thought is driven to fix the problem, and it fights like crazy to do so, and the person can feel it. The human entity thought. The concept that we are a human entity is an actual thing and is placed in the child before birth to be realized later. The human entity thought. In the normal person, the person is given the thought that it is a human entity as its natural state of being. The concept thought and the action thought work together to use that thought, making the person a human being. In the killer, the concept of being a human entity is missing, but the action to use the human entity concept keeps fighting and fighting and fighting on and on to use the human entity concept, just like the handicapped person who rocks on and on. Human entity thought. If the concept is missing, the action still unconsciously fights to be human. Because it is unconscious and before memory is developed, there is nothing for the person to compare it to, so it is another dimension. And the action thought fights like a pot boiling over, like a monster entering your brain. You can't stop it. The action thought fights like you cannot imagine. The unconscious pain of the missing concept thought is always there and very deep, and the person is driven beyond its sense of compassion or humanity to fix it. So how do they try to fix the problem of the human entity concept thought that is missing? They take the human entity from another. The action thought fights to do its job, and eventually the person, in desperation to heal, takes the life of another to fill the missing concept thought of being a human entity. The action thought fights to do its job. Just like the teenager in the living room who gets up and sits down again because the concept is not there, but the action thought is trying to work, so is the action thought in the killer trying to force the being to do what it will as a human entity. The action thought has the job to do something, which is to think as a human, but it can't because the concept is not there. Just like the handicapped person who gets up and sits down or walks incessantly because the action part of the thought is still trying, this person's action part of the thought is still fighting to act, and it tries every day, and they can feel it. Notice in his words that James speaks of suicide or homicide and value of another going to him by killing. Then think of Sol Pais, who ran through the woods naked with no shoes to kill herself after she failed to kill others.
Talk to me about the necessity of carrying out the shootings themselves after the preparation had done its job.
Well, the shoes were supposed to increase my self-worth.
What was it made it so important that you did it?
Because the alternative was suicide.
And I think you said this morning the alternative was suicide, but you weren't thinking of that at the time.
Right.
You weren't thinking of suicide.
Because I was focused on the homicide.
In what way did you think of taking other people's lives as enhancing yours? Tell me about the logic of that.
Just that anything they would have done or pursued gets canceled out and given. Now you can kind of place a value on a life. And if you take lives away, that kind of adds to your own value.
Whether called factor X by one killer or an urge by another or a compulsion or the other side of the window, it is a disorder that can be explained. Forensic psychologists say it is the mystery of mysteries that will never be solved. The reason no psychologist can help these people who often turn to them for help is that the thought that causes the problem begins before memory is formed. This makes it a developmental disorder rather than a psychological one. Because the problem is probably before birth and certainly before memory, it is all the person knows. They know something is wrong, but they don't know what. And very importantly, there is nothing for them to remember to compare it to. This is why they say, I was born a monster. I have been like this my whole life. This is why they are unable to stop. There is, of course, more to the story of the natural state of being and the specific thoughts that cause serial killing. But now you understand somewhat what is going on, and hopefully if the serial killer understands, there will be no person who loses their life to this killing and no person who loses their life to prison. I have heard them called schizophrenic, yet they don't fit the definition, so they are called from the schizophrenic spectrum. I heard them say the devil made them do it. I heard they have brain damage, though Jeffrey Dahmer tested as having no brain damage. It is mind, and that cannot be seen. And yes, this disorder can be healed, and has been, but first it needs to be seen for what it really is.